Thank you. Okay, and thanks for inviting me to this symposium. It's been really great. My talk is on interstellar communication using microbes, implications for SETI. It's a rather involved subject. I won't be able to cover it adequately and certainly not defend it adequately in a talk of 15 minutes, but if you want to read more about what I have to say on this, I have a paper of this title, which you can find with Google on the internet, or you can read about it in my new book coming out next month, The Case for Space, along with a lot of other great ideas. First chart. Or do I do it? Huh? Okay. All right. The question, where are they? Here's Sarah Seeger presenting the results of the Kepler mission to the Pickering lecture. 1 in 5 stars in our galaxy have an Earth-sized planet in its habitable zone. Tens of billions, maybe 100 billion stars. Life appeared on Earth virtually as soon as it could. There's no evidence that there was ever a habitable Earth that was sterile. None. Life appeared here virtually immediately, which implies one of two things. Either it's a cinch for life to develop from chemistry as soon as it has a chance, okay, in which case life is everywhere in the galaxy, or life was already floating around in space waiting to land on Earth as soon as it was possible to live here, in which case life is everywhere in the galaxy. Okay? Either way, that's where it comes out. Now, they've had billions of years to evolve and develop into intelligent beings and to get here. So how come we don't see any evidence of their presence? We should. Maybe we do. Now, up till now, the only real search there's been for extraterrestrial intelligence has been Radio SETI. Frank Drake, 1960, let's look for their radios. And is reasonable hypothesis to check out, but it's been 60 years and it hasn't been found. Now, maybe they could still find it. Maybe we need to look at higher frequencies. I think we do. But there are some real problems here with this assumption. I mean, you take Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. From Mars, it's 6 megabits a second to a 70-meter dish. If it was at TOS SETI, it would be 6 microbits a second. Now, you could improve it to 6 bits a second by increasing the power from 100 watts to 100 megawatts. But now you're talking serious money, resources for this form of communication, and they would have to be broadcasting not only at us, but at thousands, millions of stars, and for millions of years. Because even if they selected only those planets that showed an oxygen signature for life, well, we've had that for hundreds of millions of years. Okay? So this is a rather problematic mode of communication. I mean, it's fine if you're communicating to your own outposts on a nearby star system, but to communicate into the void like this is very problematic. Okay, and furthermore, there's no sound arguments why such behavior would be adaptive on their part. So what about another method of communication? Now, think about this. Let's say you were trying to improve the character of the children in your neighborhood by telling moral instruction through stories. So you walk around the neighborhood and start shouting stories at houses, okay, hoping, not knowing, if children live in those houses, if they're home when you're doing the shouting, if the stories you're telling are interesting, comprehensible, and instructive for them, if they're paying attention, okay. This is a rather ineffective way to get the job done. On the other hand, you could walk around the neighborhood putting storybooks in mail slots, and that would be much more likely to get a hit. Okay? But it would be expensive if you had to print all these storybooks and put them in everybody's mail slots. So the effectiveness of that method of communication relies upon two things: a very cheap method of producing the storybooks and a cheap method of delivering them. And I submit to you that in the case of interstellar communication, there is a way to cheaply replicate solid objects that contain books of information and to send them. And this is in bacterial DNA. They can record the information and they can be sent. Okay, let's talk about the sending of them. If you have any object that has a ballistic coefficient of 1.5 grams per square meter and you were to release that into heliocentric space outside of the gravity field of the Earth, okay, it would experience the sun's gravity pulling it in, and it would experiencing light pressure pushing it out. And they, in fact, would, at that ballistic coefficient, they would balance. So it would feel no gravity from the sun, and if it was co-orbiting with the Earth, which is at 30 kilometers a second, it would move in a straight line right out of the solar system at 30 kilometers a second, because it would have no net forces on it. These forces would balance at 1 AU and at 10 AU and whatever, because they both go down as r squared. Okay? So there you go. Now, it turns out that if you have a sphere, which is of water density and 2 microns in diameter, you do get that ballistic coefficient. Okay, now that's roughly the size of bacteria. Now, of course, this relationship depends on the brightness of the star, which it looks like this chart got scrambled, but the basic information is if it's a K, F, or G star, you can do it. And M stars are a little bit too dim. Now, of course, you can make shapes that are better starships than spheres. So here is my design for a interstellar starship. Sorry, how do I go backwards here? Is there any way? Oh, forward, I see. And then the laser pointer. Is there one? All right, well, imagine I had a laser pointer. And there's the ship. Okay, now it's a little ship. The cargo compartment is 4 microns in diameter, and then the wingspan, the hypotenuse between those two, this is like a badminton birdie, okay, is what it's like. So it's passively stable. The sunlight is pushing it from the lower left up towards the upper right, and if it turned either way, it would be pushed back. Now, this one, with the wings having a thickness of 1 micron and a wingspan of 10 microns, and then a cargo compartment of 4 microns. This would fly out of the solar system at 30 kilometers a second if it was released at 1 AU. If we brought it in closer to the sun, say 1/10 of an AU, and then released it, it would go screaming out of the solar system at 95 kilometers a second. Now, this is a little ship. If you want a monster, you could increase the size of the cargo hold by a factor of 100, which would require increasing the wingspan by a factor of 1,000. So now, instead of being 10 microns across, it's 10 millimeters across, and you have a cargo compartment that is not 4 microns in diameter, but 400 microns in diameter, and you can carry a virtual Noah's Ark of microbial life in that. And they would be protected from ultraviolet because it only takes about half a micron of soot to protect them from ultraviolet, which is why naked panspermia cannot work, the kind proposed by Arrhenius way back when. But if they have a little bit of engineered protection, half a micron of soot, they're safe, and we have an ample hold here. Now, it should be evident that manufacturing objects of this kind is entirely within our capabilities today. Now, this is not the only possible design. An alternative design would be, instead of the badminton birdie part, you attach that cargo hold to a balloon that is a sphere, and you put a millibar or so of hydrogen gas in it to keep it inflated, and that would also be passively stable as well. And it should be clear that if any of these things with a ballistic coefficient this low were to hit an atmosphere of a planet at high velocity, they would decelerate without substantial heating, so that they could enter an atmosphere and then float down into the planet without being burnt up on impact. Okay, so this is what a starship will look like. Now, how much data can they send? A lot. The people have done experiments with this. They've put entire books programmed into the DNA of a single bacteria. Can they make the trip? Well, 30 kilometers a second is 10 to the minus 4 of the speed of light. So it means you could go 10 light years in 100,000 years. You'd get a dose of between 0.1 and between 1 and 10 megarads, which is close to the limit for radiodurans. But you only need a few survivors. You don't need everybody to live. you know, they knew what their chances were when they got on the ship. Okay. And we could send, of course, thousands and thousands of them. They could send thousands and thousands of them. Now, it should be noted here that such long trips might not be necessary. And this brings me to the question of natural panspermia, which is not necessary for this theory. In fact, it's a problem for it, because the fact that, as I'm about to show, that natural panspermia is, or transvitalization, to use a non-sexist term, is possible, creates difficulties that we'd have to distinguish between natural and artificial. But see, the stars are not always the same distance apart. If you just take the random notion of the stars in our area, which is like 10 kilometers a second, you take the density, which is like 1 in every 300 cubic light years, what you get is you get a pass within 1 light year every 3 million years, within half a light year, which is 30,000 AU, well within the Oort cloud, every 12 million years, within a third of a light year, every 30 million years. So within every 10 or 20, 30 million years, you're passing through somebody else's Oort cloud. They're passing through our Oort cloud. We're exchanging bombardments. And both they're destabilizing our material onto us. We're destabilizing their material onto us. And we're sending a lot of stuff their way as well. And so, by the way, this is when a lot of ejections are going to happen. So these are like warships in the age of fighting sail that had global range but only discharged their broadsides when they were within a few hundred yards of each other, because that's as far as they could shoot. But naturally, that's when they would shoot. And so they're passing through our Oort cloud in any case, which is littered with debris from previous impacts, and we're having a chance to hit them. Now think about this. 20 million years, pick that, which, by the way, is incidentally the characteristic frequency of mass extinctions on Earth. It's an interesting number. Since life occurred on Earth, that's happened like 180 times. So we've had 180 shots at spreading life from Earth to other solar systems. And if only one, well, if one of them was to actually transfer life, then life on Earth would have passed the ball on to one other. If two, then we've doubled. And then if all stars are doing this, you have a supercritical reactor, which would indicate that, once again, life would be everywhere, which is what the data indicates. Now, what are the messages that are worth sending? Okay, there's been a paradigm in the SETI world since Carl Sagan, where, okay, goes like this. First, they transmit you something like, here's the value of pi. Do you get it? Okay, good, you know math. It means you're smart. Okay, now we'll send you our dictionary, and then we're going to send you the plans for starships. Okay, you know, like that. Okay, now, I don't think that that is a reasonable paradigm. Because, first of all, it's not adaptive to be broadcasting your starship plans into interstellar space. But what is adaptive is, if there's life everywhere, trying to influence it to be like you. I mean, what kind of information do we transmit to people that we don't know and who we don't expect to hear back from? Think Radio Free Europe or Radio Moscow. Be like us. Or think of the Gideons, which is more closer to this example, putting the Bibles in hotel rooms, hoping to convert people to their faith. Be like us. That's what they're trying to do. Okay, now, so propaganda is related very closely to propagation. Now, why would ETs want to propagate? Well, I can't tell you their motives, but what I will tell you is those that do would be the ones that do propagate. Okay, and therefore would be the ones that we see. So, Penny, this is for you, as I promised. The mutation is the message. Okay, that's what it is. It's not, here's our collected works. It's be like us, and here's some useful suggestions. Now, DNA, the bacteria themselves need a certain amount of DNA to run their own show and stay alive. But they also carry a lot of junk DNA whose purpose is not clear. And of course, this is true of macroscopic organisms as well. Now, to take a really interesting example. A few years ago, some scientists activated some genes in chick embryos, and the chicks were born with teeth. Teeth, dinosaur traits. Now, this is not entirely mind-blowing because, after all, chickens are descended from dinosaurs. Their ancestors did have teeth. So they still have the files on their old career, okay? And these were activated, okay? But is it possible that there could be traits encoded in the genomes of organisms that represent contingency plans for future careers? Okay, that's an interesting question. But otherwise, I mean, just talking about throwing information, suggestions into the biosphere. Try chlorophyll, try symbiogenesis, try multicellularity, try bilateral symmetry, try lungs. Hey, you know, this is a good idea. Give it a try. Now, okay, so there's two ways you can go about this. You can look for the messengers or you could look for the messages. Okay, now the messengers would be bacteria that we think recently arrived from space. So you could just take any old bacterial sample and subject them to space-like environments of vacuum and radiation and heat and cold and everything, and see which survive, which have the most adaptations for spaceflight, indicating that that's where they came. We could send spacecraft into space with aerogel to try to sample for microbes. We could look for anomalous microbes in the Earth's stratosphere, as Jerry Soffin did in the 1960s, and found them in abundance. But you say, couldn't that be from upwelling from the Earth? Yeah, it could, although there's this temperature inversion that argues against that. But okay, let's look for them in the atmospheres of Mars, Titan, Venus. Or we could try looking for microsailcraft themselves in planetary atmospheres. Now, the message, once again, is not, I don't think it's being decoded by cryptanalysis. Okay, I think it's decoded by seeing what it does if it's integrated into life. And in other words, life's the amplifier. The biosphere is the amplifier. It will multiply the genes that are transmitted to the Earth by these organisms and then perhaps get them implanted into organisms. So if genes carried by suspected astrobacteria are found to induce the appearance of traits representative of extinct phyla or new phyla, that would be very exciting. Now, of course, you know, creating, I mean, it's physically possible that there could be birds with radar, and of course we don't see them, but that'd be a lot to ask for. But maybe a new protein that allows a new kind of tooth or something like this that we've never seen. Now, I do want to talk about this concept of forward-looking information. Okay, let's say you have a mother who is trying to influence the intellectual development of her child. Now, she might put various objects in the child's room. Letter blocks for a 2-year-old, picture books for a 4-year-old, chapter books like Harry Potter for an 8-year-old, War and Peace for a 16-year-old, okay, whatever. Now, if you find stuff that is of forward-looking nature in that environment, in other words, if the child is 8, and maybe she's going to the library and taking out books, she's got Harry Potter there, okay, you can explain that, it's part of her ecosphere, but what if War and Peace is also there? That is suggestive of somebody attempting to induce a certain change in a certain direction. Okay, that is parental guidance. Okay, so what about organisms? Now, of course, if you're sending these into the blind, you might send them all because you don't know what child is in that house. Deliver the letter blocks and the picture books and the chapter books and the literature, okay? And let the one that's right do its thing. And then if it develops further, then the other one will kick in. Okay. So once again, if suspected astrobacteria were found to induce the appearance of forward-looking traits in various organisms, that would be suggestive of SETI. Once again, mice and fish. We know there are fish genes in mice. In fact, they evidence gills during their embryonic period. That's, once again, understandable. They evolved from fish. Are there... Yeah, no, I said mice genes. We know there are fish genes in mice because they evidence this thing. If you found mice genes in fish, that would be really something. Okay, but maybe you don't find the whole mouse. Maybe you just find milk, the protein for that, or whatever. Okay, so once again, looking for forward-looking information in the genome. Now, how could we test this hypothesis? Okay, I think we can test it by going to Mars. Look, there's 4 possibilities of what we might find on Mars. One is we find 0 evidence of past or present life on Mars. Okay, this would disprove panspermia of either the natural or artificial kind. Okay, because Mars had a similar environment to Earth when Earth first manifested life, and it should have, if there's stuff coming in from the outside, it should have landed and multiplied, and as pointed out this morning by a speaker, if it ever was there, it's still there in the groundwater. So if we find no life or fossils, that disproves the whole thing. Okay, we find life in Martian groundwater, which use the same biochemistry as Earth life, but also includes more primitive evolutionary representatives than bacteria. That would suggest that life on Earth evolved on Mars and then was transferred to Earth. Okay, that would also disprove this theory. That it would show trans-vitalization, but only within our solar system. We find a second genesis on Mars. That would show that life can originate autonomously wherever it has a chance, and if it came from a different kind, then it certainly wasn't transvitalization from interstellar sources. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to find life on Mars, and it's going to have the same biochemistry as Earth life, and it will not include more primitive representatives than the fully developed free-living bacteria that we see on Earth. Now this is, okay, so I'm going out on a limb here, making the prediction. Now this result would be conform to transvitalization from interstellar space. But it would not in itself prove that it was artificial. Okay, but it would tell you that they came from outside. And if they, the Martian biota, had the ability to provoke some forward-looking developments in either Earth bacteria or Earth macrofauna or flora or something, then that would prove that they were messengers. So, you know, there you would have proof of transvitalization, and you would have strong evidence that it was that you were looking at messengers. So, to summarize, once again, why would they do it? It's simple. It's those that do it would be the ones that are there. Okay, you know, why are you if you encounter a person randomly on the surface of the Earth, why is it much more likely that that person is a member of a religion which seeks converts, like Christianity or Islam, than, for instance, Judaism, which does not seek converts? It's because if they seek converts, they're going to have a lot more converts. And they are demarcated from each other by, you know, the vodka hashish line and all that. But in any case, that's it. If those that seek to propagate are those that will propagate. Now, it will be observed that this program is entirely within our technical means at the present. If it turns out that no one's been doing it, no one's been doing the noble work of spreading life, then I think we should. If it turns out that they are, I think we should get into the game. Only parents have children. Thank you.